Hello and welcome to another episode of MediaSnack Meets. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Phil Smith, Director General of ISBA. Now, ISBA is the leading UK trade body representing British advertisers.
Well, we're the only trade body representing advertisers per se.
Absolutely, and the voice of British advertisers.
That's the line, yes.
So, well, thank you, and welcome to IDComms and welcome to MediaSnack. You've been in the role now 2 years. Okay, so in the last 2 years, especially from a media perspective, they have been pretty turbulent times. We're still having issues around transparency. Trust, if anything, is going backwards. We feel, certainly from the research that we've...
I think there's some real chinks of light, but yeah, we've seen the research. Yes, I think as a broad picture, transparency and trust remain big issues.
That's fair. We've had issues around the murky and fraudulent supply chain. There are issues around ad fraud, brand safety. If there has ever been a time when your members need you as a trade body to step up and help protect them, now is it. How do you as a leader begin to address those challenges and reassure your members that they're in safe hands?
Well, I got this job because the members felt exactly that they wanted a stronger voice from ISBA. I promised to make the organisation a more challenging campaigning organisation, and transparency was the big issue at the time that I joined. I preceded the famous Mark Pritchard speech by a matter of weeks, so he stole all of the best lines. And I was encouraged by our council members to be bold. So when we launched our manifesto in March of last year, which put a transparent, accountable and responsible media marketplace at the very top of the list, it was exactly what they've been asking me to do.
Fantastic. And so let's just delve into the manifesto. So it was a 4-point manifesto. Do you mind just sort of sharing with me a little bit of what the thinking was behind it?
Yes, I can. As you say, a 4-point manifesto. A couple of those would have been traditional, what I call traditional ISBA staples and favourites. So we talked about plurality and choice for advertisers, which is something that we've always been standing up for, whether it's been in TV or in press. And we also talked about the importance of the self-regulation system, both making sure that the system itself is fit for the future, but also making sure that advertisers have the right skills and orientation and motivation to work with the grain of the system. But two things were new. And the first we've already touched on, which was that overriding need to help to make the marketplace more transparent, accountable and responsible. And the second was a desire to take a much more active role when it comes to having a point of view on effectiveness and ROI, which traditionally has been the say the premise of the agency work that's been done, but where we feel in this more complex environment, advertisers themselves need to have a point of view. But most of the work that we've done probably over the last 18 months has been focused on that first transparent, accountable and responsible heading. And it's really under two broad areas. First of all, working with the supply side itself, with the major platforms on issues like brand safety and ad fraud, which have really come to the fore. But it's also been working on trying to create better alignment between client and agency, and that's more about alignment of interest than anything else. And we tend not to use the term transparency and trust in a way that is adversarial, because we don't think that's going to get anywhere. And we think that the only way in which some of these issues will get resolved is by the industry working together.
Quite right, absolutely. And just on that point of transparency, and I think you're referring to the contract framework that you guys have championed. The original one, the 1.0 version, came out in 2016. We helped the team to work on that, and that was an amazing initiative. And then last year, you launched, was it this year? This year, you launched the revised version. What was the difference between the two?
Several big differences. The market had moved on, and we put in a lot more granularity when it comes to expectations of agencies in the management of digital. Obviously things like adoptions of JIC web standards, and we've also broken out more the thinking around transparency and visibility of the supply chain when it comes to things like value pots and rebates. And in the contract itself and in the guidance notes, we've put a lot of extra explanation in, which will help advertisers as they navigate their way through their individual negotiations to get to a clearer understanding of how each party is going to get benefit from the relationship.
I remember when you launched the first one, there was some pushback from the agencies. Generally, the traditional holding companies had one or two issues with it. The independent community, I think, were more embracing of it. How have the agencies responded to the second version?
Well, we worked much more closely with the agency community on the second version. We worked with PwC, as you know, who helped us in doing quite a lot of the consultation. So the 2.0 was very much our document, it was our editorial, but we did take the drafts out to agencies to talk to them about it. And that means that it has landed with the major holding companies in particular with a much more constructive reception. And whilst every negotiation is going to be individual and not everything is going to be agreed to, it does mean that it gives us a platform from which to move forward on trying to forge an alignment of interest rather than the rather more adversarial position we had before.
Well, I congratulate you, because I think that was a brilliant initiative, both of them. In our experience, certainly with the clients that we speak to, normally the contractual bit is relatively straightforward. The challenges that I still think many advertisers have is within the opaqueness of the digital supply chain. And we've talked a lot about that, and the leakages and the value leakages and the issues around that. How do you as a trade body begin to address those concerns?
Well, let's take that in two parts. I mean, first of all, the value chain, supply chain is complex. We think it's been made more complex and more murky because of that lack of alignment of interest between agencies and clients historically. We can see some really good examples of clients who've been working with their agencies, not just on contract frameworks, but also on ways of working and on remuneration models that create a much better alignment, and through that are able to get much better visibility of what's going on. And you can use examples like Barclays and Sky and the government themselves, Direct Line before them. And we are working directly with the IPA, with the holding companies, with marketeers, with procurement to create better blueprints for better ways of working to create more sustainable working relationships between agency and client. And I think that's one part of the equation. I mean, the other part is just throwing even more light on what's going on in that supply chain, which is incredibly complex, and where the famous waterfall chart that the WFA produced 2 years or so ago, still gets rolled out and used a lot, but only gets you so far in understanding how advertisers are actually booking their media either directly or through their agencies. So we're doing further work to create more light and education around that. But ultimately we think that a lot of this can be resolved by advertisers themselves getting properly educated, taking more control of their relationships, of the frameworks that they're working with their supply base and with their agencies on. And also insisting on much more transparent supply chains, so working with private marketplaces, doing more direct dealing, and staying away from those parts of the web which we know are just much more inherently murky and dangerous.
So there's 2 points there that I'd like to just to pick up on. The first is you're referencing, I suppose, self-regulation. Do you think that's enough, or do you think that it's going to require some form of government intervention? I mean, we've got in the US, we've got the Department of Justice issuing subpoenas. Who knows where that's going to come out with? But in the same way that they regulated the financial industry, do you think that it's going to require that level of intervention, or do you think the industry in itself can self-regulate?
The short answer is we think the industry can sort itself out. I mean, the US situation is different. We've obviously studied in detail the ANA transparency report, and much of it was a set of findings that we wouldn't have found entirely surprising, and would have been part of the thinking that led to the first media services framework. And we'll have to see how the situation plays out in the US, but let's not forget that the legal situation is different there, and agencies buy on a different basis. And there haven't been allegations of wrongdoing here, but there have been issues around contracts that don't align well the interests. We fundamentally believe that the legal framework here in the UK, if clients are suitably educated and work well with their agencies and work on their frameworks and align their interests, that can be sorted out. That's not to say that we think there's more that needs to be done in the arena of self-regulation, and in particular around regulation of advertising and regulation of content and data. We think there's more that needs to be done, and the industry can do quite a lot to help itself to avoid statutory regulation there.
And the second point was, and you mentioned it twice, you talked about client education. And so part of your role is not only to champion the requirements of your members, but also to empower them to make smarter decisions.
You've just stolen my lines, really. Right. I mean, we're there for advocacy and representation, but on the back of that, we're there to help advertisers make better decisions based on the advice and the guidance and the consultancy that we give them. One of the opportunities for us, let's put it that way, something that we still feel we need to do better, is to take a lot of the very specialist work that we do and translate it into something that every marketeer needs to do. Not every marketeer wants to read a 62-page media services framework and contract, and we'd say that one of the reasons why we think this can be sorted out is because of oversight and interest. Yeah. But one of our challenges as we're dealing with CMOs and the generalist marketeers is how do we translate the specialist knowledge that we've got into the 5 or 6 things that they really need to know and the questions that they need to ask in order to be able to get the best out of their procurement teams and their legal teams and their agency partners. Now, some clients are obviously very good at this already, but it's not as widespread as we would like it to be. So we think there's a lot that we can do through our training agenda, through our events agenda, through our networking, and through the way in which we put out communications to distill down the learnings from our very specialist work in contracts, in the digital supply chain, such that people can really get the right questions to ask and drive the right results.
And as clients and advertisers become more informed and their capabilities increase, there may be an opportunity for them to begin to bring more responsibility in-house and take greater control, not only of smarter governance when it comes to media, and we specialise obviously in media, but also in the execution of that. So there's been a lot of conversation recently about brands, Vodafone being the most high profile perhaps, of brands beginning to bring in executional capabilities in-house. Are you finding that as a trend within your members and the conversations that you're taking part in?
There's a lot of interest in the area, and we are now beginning to bring together groups of our members to share best practice and share their learnings. I think when it comes to in-housing on the creative side, that's obviously been going on for a very long time, although most of it has been focused around what we'd call downstream creative production. In media, I think it's a much trickier beast, and there will be some advertisers and members who are better equipped to take on those challenges than others, particularly those for whom a lot of use of first-party data is informing their decision-making. But I think it's not for everybody, it's not for the faint-hearted, and it needs very careful management and understanding of what capabilities you need to build and what you need to bring in-house in order to be able to manage it. We see people who say you can take this programmatic supply chain in-house and have much better visibility, and we say, well, that's fine, but how do you plug that into the overall environment without creating yet another silo and a beast of its own? I mean, we already see in many of our members a bit of a dichotomy between the e-commerce side and the performance side and the brand building side, and they run off with different budgets on different agendas. I think when people talk about in-housing big chunks of their media execution, it's a big ask. I'm not saying that some people won't be able to do it, and it probably will get easier over time, but it's a way off for most of our members, I'd say.
Yeah, it's a really good perspective. Okay, and finally, so you've had 24 months of your tenure.
Not quite, nearly. Over 20.
A baptism of fire, perhaps. Yeah. How do you see the next 2 years?
Oh, I think there's some really exciting things to chase down in the next couple of years. We've talked publicly about our desire to have independent, verifiable audience measurement for digital video, and to have that ultimately joined up with TV viewing. Right now, for young audiences, measurement of linear TV and broadcast of VOD doesn't account for the lion's share of their viewing by Thinkbox's own numbers. So we need to find ways of creating a clear read-through to give advertisers deduplicated reach and frequency numbers, and to be able to certainly to plan on that basis, and who knows, maybe one day buy on that. So we're very keen to play our part in the industry to drive that forward, whether that's through our work with Barb or UCOM, or even something that might be yet to come. And I think we'll start seeing that come to fruition in the course of the next few months. So that's a big one. I mean, in-housing we've talked about, that's a really exciting area for us as well. And then I think just add GDPR actually. GDPR, I think we're only at the start of the journey. I think the goal, the carrot there is to have consumers much more empowered and trusting when it comes to the use of their data by advertisers. Right now, we know from research we've seen that consumers think that advertisers are very competent, but they're not necessarily to be trusted in their motives. We think that data transparency from a consumer point of view is going to be one of the big issues for the next couple of years, and we think we can help, again, advertisers make better decisions on the basis of the advice we provide there.
Brilliant. Phil, thank you so much for joining me on MediaSnack. We need our industry needs the trade bodies to be strong and to be impactful and to add real value. And I wish you the best of luck in your tenure.
You're very kind, but we always said it's a team effort and we can't do it alone.
Good. Well, listen, thank you for joining me today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.